My friends, as you know, Donald Trump was elected as President of the United States once again. Despite the large amount of meltdowns on social media, what does this mean for Ukraine? Well, at first glance, it's not looking good, especially after headlines like Crimea is gone. Trump ally says Ukraine focus must be peace, not territory.
Emotional damage!
It's not a surprise even during his campaign. Trump repeatedly said he would push for peace talks between Ukraine and Russia if elected.
Ukraine is gone. It's not Ukraine anymore. As president-elect, if I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you gotta make a deal. This is crazy.
And even claimed he could get a deal done within 24 hours.
I will get it solved in rapid order, and it will take me no longer than one day. I know exactly what to say to each of them. I got along very well with them.
In the PBD podcast by Valuetainment, Trump also blamed Zelensky for starting the war, saying he should never have let that war start.
I'm so fucking scared right now, you shut up!
At this rate, the Ukrainians are like, 33 years of independence, back to square one. At the same time, allegedly Trump called Zelensky on the 8th of November. And according to the rumors, it went well. The Economist even wrote, why Zelensky may welcome Donald Trump's victory. Additionally, Trump's elected Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. And let's say he's very hostile to Russia. So there is hope for Ukraine. For Ukraine, it's a die toss. But there's a window of opportunity. It can't be worse than the Biden administration's double standards. Helping Ukraine, but not too much. Anyway, as part of this discussion, I find this picture very telling. At the top, Trump and Zelensky 5 years ago, and at the bottom, the same picture in 2024. As you can see, a lot of things have changed since then. Overall, it's a Trump trademark to bring people to the negotiating table and close a business deal. It's a power move. He's the one in charge. Only America can decide who wins the war. Now, President-elect Donald Trump only has one real leverage, the supply of weapons. To put pressure on Ukraine, he can halt weapons and ammunition deliveries. And to annoy Russia, Trump can open the gates of the US arsenal to the Ukrainian military. On the 6th of November, the Wall Street Journal wrote, Trump promised to end the war in Ukraine. Now he must decide how. With that being said, this entire story is open to speculation because Trump is unpredictable. He has not yet talked about a specific peace plan or as to how he will convince Zelensky and Putin to sit down at the table of negotiations. For many, Trump's arrival at power could mean the end of this terrible war going on in Ukraine. For others, it might just be wishful thinking. So in this video, we'll analyze this entire situation and look at the possible scenarios that could happen in the next few months. Welcome to History Legends, and here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running. Thank you to everyone that has already helped, and welcome to the headquarters. Before we start talking about specific peace plans, it's important to remember that foreign policy is not important to American voters. That's not the reason why they would vote for one candidate or the other. They live in their own bubble. They don't care about Ukraine or the geopolitical implications it could bring. What Americans are concerned about is how they can improve their own lives, about the cost of living, about the border, how their taxpayer money is being spent, and why after spending $175 billion on Ukraine, the White House still has no real strategy laid out for a path to victory in Ukraine. And let's just say the American public is not ready to repeat the Afghanistan financial black hole. It might seem obvious, but for this peace plan to work, both sides need to agree to sit at the table of negotiations. Ukraine doesn't have much choice because it depends on US support, but it's not so certain for Russia. There's a very good chance that Putin outright refuses. For him, it's not the Americans that will dictate the outcome of the Ukraine war, because from his perspective, this war is being fought on Russia's terms only. We have to remember that the Russians are highly suspicious regarding tables of negotiations and plans involving freezing the front. The ceasefires of 2014 and 2015 led nowhere. Actually, it helped Ukraine become heavily militarized. Then the Russians have been fooled by the peace talks in the spring of 2022. And from that point, we could say the Rubicon has been crossed. Even this summer when Zelensky spoke of peace, the Russians let their guard down and Ukraine launched an offensive right into Russia. Let's just say the Russians have had their fair share of peace talks, tables of negotiations, and ceasefire agreements, especially when the mediators were Western powers. Even if Trump can bring Russia and Ukraine to the table of negotiations, it will be difficult. Zelensky said it himself regarding a quick end to the war. Today I believe that Trump really wants a quick solution, but it does not mean that it will work. Now for the sake of the argument, let's say peace talks are starting. Option 1 that I saw online would be to freeze the front line wherever it stands by the time Trump enters the White House. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance suggested in September that Russia should have to hold on to its current gains as a condition of peace. Then it's vague, but essentially it involves forming some sort of demilitarized zone to prevent the Russians from invading again. A bit like the DMZ separating North and South Korea. Thing is, Putin doesn't benefit from such a plan. There's a big wave of demoralization hitting Ukrainian forces, and the Russian army is gaining ground like no tomorrow. Freezing the front would just destroy the current momentum of Russian forces. Now, if Russia does agree to a ceasefire, this could mean that its armed forces are actually truly exhausted. But personally, I doubt it. Okay, so that was the military perspective. Now from a political perspective. Russia's minimum victory condition is the full capture of the separatist republics of Donetsk and Luhansk, commonly known as the Donbass. This is what started this entire war. If we take a quick look at the map, this objective has not yet been achieved. Although Luhansk is almost entirely conquered at 99%, Russian forces only control about 60% of Donetsk Oblast. More importantly, the crown jewels, the cities of Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, are still under Ukrainian control. So Trump's plan to freeze the conflict could face a big niet from Russia, because the Russian government vowed to liberate the Donbass. If they can't achieve this objective, it means Russia has failed. But that's not all. There's another reason why Russia could outright refuse to freeze the front. On the 30th of September 2022, Putin signed the annexation of the oblasts of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk, meaning these regions are now all legally part of Russia. If we take a closer look at the map, we already covered the Donbass. Now as for the other regions, Russian forces control approximately 70% of Zaporizhia Oblast and about 65% of Kherson Oblast. However, the major urban areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson city are both still under Ukrainian control. Now this poses a great problem. By Russian law, all this belongs to Russia. So signing such a peace deal that would freeze the front is not only unacceptable, it would also mean ceding Russian territory to Ukraine. The Telegraph reported, British troops patrolling an 800-mile buffer zone.
Yeah, baby!
Wait. Why would Russia agree to a plan involving having thousands of NATO troops right at its border? Even from a technical perspective, European ground forces are already stretched thin. They don't have enough manpower to spare to cover a 1,200-kilometer border. And let's be honest, the chances of an incident are just too high, like some sort of border clash that would lead us straight to World War III. And apparently this peace plan keeps getting worse for Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal reported that one of the options of Donald Trump for ending the war may be for Ukraine to refuse to join NATO for at least 20 years. So have you seen, a big part of these peace plan proposals are wishful thinking. Even worse, Ukraine still has a 750 square kilometer breachhead inside Russia. Put simply, for Putin, the front cannot be frozen. Now that I'm thinking about it, this could have been one of the main objectives of Ukraine's Kursk offensive. Prevent any realistic attempts of peace talks and of freezing the front. As for Ukraine, they would probably be unfavorable to this peace plan proposal as well, because they would have to cede 18% of land to Russia. Wave goodbye to Crimea, Prashai Krim. But it would also put a big red X on their objective to get back to the 1991 borders. I can hardly imagine how Zelensky could effectively sign off entire Ukrainian oblasts to Russia. Especially since, according to Article 2 of the Ukrainian Constitution, Any changes to the state borders of Ukraine are prohibited. Ukraine will certainly reject those terms as it would be tantamount to capitulation. That would mean since 2014, tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have died for nothing, possibly hundreds of thousands of wounded for nothing, all for a lost cause. In such a scenario, we can expect the Ukrainians to be extremely resentful and claim that the US simply stabbed them in the back. At the same time, Ukraine could potentially benefit from a ceasefire, as this would put a pause to this horrible war of attrition that they're suffering from. Here, according to The Economist, Ukraine is struggling to replace battlefield losses with conscription, barely hitting 2/3 of its target. In other words, we know Ukraine mobilizes about 30,000 men per month, so if that only covers 2/3 of their needs in replacements, if those figures are right, this means in theory, Ukraine could currently be losing as many as 45,000 KIA or wounded per month. I did an entire video exactly on this topic of the war of attrition in Ukraine, so if you're interested, the link is in the description below. Such casualty rates are unsustainable without a drastic change. Now with some sort of ceasefire, Ukraine could then continue to mobilize and covertly rebuild its forces. They could perhaps even prepare another offensive. Thing is, Russia knows this, so freezing the front does not benefit them at all. Overall, Moscow declared that their war objectives have not changed. Ukraine has to drop its NATO ambitions and withdraw all its troops from the territory of the 4 oblasts annexed by Russia. In the meantime, the BBC reported Russia denies Trump call with Putin urging restraint in Ukraine. This is also what Brian Lanza, former advisor to Trump, told the BBC on the 9th of November. When Zelensky says we will only stop fighting once Crimea is returned, we've got news for President Zelensky, Crimea is gone. Or quotes like Ukraine focus must be peace, not territory. These terms are extremely harsh, but does Ukraine even have a choice? Ukrainian authorities will certainly grind their teeth, but Trump could simply tell Zelensky,
He's a loser.
look, you gotta face the fact that the war is over. The Ukrainian army is finished. Better take the deal. Because in the end, Ukraine might lose even more land than what was initially written in the peace plan. And if Zelensky keeps resisting, Trump could twist Zelensky's arms and withhold weapon deliveries. And say, you're on your own, buddy, good luck. Let's just say that everyone sits at the table of negotiations like good boys and that the war magically ends. There won't be peace. But for what? From a geopolitical perspective, the outcome of the Ukraine war would be a monumental disaster for US diplomacy. It would mean countries can attack other ones and just snatch as much land as they want. On top of that, trust will be broken between the US and its allies. Let's not forget that in 1994, the US promised to protect Ukraine's territorial sovereignty.
The United States made a formal commitment to the Ukrainians that if they gave up their nuclear weapons, we would help them protect themselves. And the Ukrainians are asking us to honor our commitment.
And now they're carving out huge chunks of the country to the enemy. It would just confirm what Henry Kissinger said. To be an enemy of America can be dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. How many more examples do we need? South Vietnam, the Shah of Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Kurds, and now Ukraine.
A great success!
Now Taiwan is looking at this dreadful pattern. What's the point of risking to have the entire country destroyed? Tons of casualties. For in the end, have the Americans settle a deal with China. Taiwan might just say, better capitulate now and we'll avoid a lot of trouble. So if Taiwan is so important to US interests, Trump has no other choice but to back Ukraine. The Economist also wrote, a total sellout of Ukraine by Mr. Trump is unlikely, not least because of opinion within his own Republican base. He will surely not want to be the author and owner of Ukraine's defeat. They explained it spot on. And knowing Trump, he probably doesn't want to be seen as a loser. And there's reason to believe that Trump is moving towards this direction. Here, according to Axios, after Zelensky congratulated Trump, the president-elect said he will support Ukraine. Additionally, the Trump White House transition team distanced itself from Lanza's comments such as Crimea is gone, possibly indicating that this is not the path they intend to take. So what could Trump actually do for Ukraine? To understand this, we have to go back a couple of years. We all know that Trump has always been a skeptic regarding endless wars. During the 2016 election, Trump was very critical of US involvement in Afghanistan and emphasized the need to refocus on domestic issues. Essentially, it's the same posture as today. Despite his public statements, remember this surge in Afghanistan during the Trump presidency, which involved an increase of airstrikes and the deployment of an additional 3,000 troops, bringing the total number of US military personnel to around 14,000 by late 2017. This is the typical Trump power move, to put pressure on the Taliban and compel them to negotiate. Perhaps Trump is thinking about something similar with Russia. Once again, we can't forget that it was Trump who lifted the Obama administration arms embargo on Ukraine. In December 2017, he agreed to provide Ukraine with $47 million worth of lethal weapons, which included 210 Javelin anti-tank missiles and 37 launchers. Although he didn't want to at first, his aides persuaded him to close this business deal. Then in July 2019, President Trump paused the release of a massive $400 million package of military assistance to Ukraine, stating he wanted assurances that Ukraine was addressing corruption first.
Oh shit, here we go again.
It's normal, as the businessman he is, he wants to know where the money's going and if the Ukrainians are going to pay him back. In the end, the aid was eventually released in September 2019. We could see something similar happen in 2025. Trump wants to get the best business deal out of this war for the United States. He understands that sending free money, billions of dollars of financial help to corrupt countries is not going to help the US economy. And truthfully, corruption has reached entire new levels since the start of the war. Donald Trump's son even made memes about cutting the allowance of President Zelensky. However, from Trump's perspective, what would help the US economy is to boost the military industry. In the end, Trump could end up saying something like, "Look, I offered Putin the best deal, the smartest, most perfect business deal ever, and he rejected it. Now I have no other choice but to show him who's boss." On the 25th of July 2024, Mike Pompeo wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal, where the essentials of what could happen to Ukraine were summarized as a Lend-Lease program, real sanctions on Russia, and a revitalized NATO. Disclaimer, it was just announced that Mike Pompeo won't join the Trump administration. So once again, this is not what Trump said he would do, but what Mike Pompeo thinks Trump could do. One of the main important points was bulk up America's defense industry. Low-key, it has already started. The total US military and economic aid to Ukraine is estimated at just under $70 billion. But a significant portion of this funding has been allocated to US defense contractors and industrial sectors. For instance, out of these $70 billion, the US has spent over $33 billion on replenishing its own weapon stockpiles, thus directly supporting the US defense industry. And we're not even talking about all the jobs that will be created and that cannot be relocated or outsourced in developing countries. Why would businessman Trump stop this cash-making machine? Another of the points related to this was to revitalize the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Trump talking about an end of the war in Ukraine also led to a wave of panic across European NATO members. Here from BNN Bloomberg, EU is looking at ramping up Ukraine aid if Trump pulls plug. Once again, it's wishful thinking, because realistically the EU can't do anything without the support of the US. Remember during Trump's first term, where he kept reminding European NATO countries about their obligations to spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. While many countries did, by 2023 Germany was falling behind with only 1.6%, Italy as well with 1.5%. Mike Pompeo thinks that Trump could squeeze them some more and say that because of this war, the bar has to be raised for NATO members to spend at least 3% of their GDP on defense. Where do you think European countries are going to buy all their military equipment from? That's right, from Uncle Sam. Now instead of sending free US taxpayers' money to Ukraine, Ukraine could instead borrow the money to buy American weapons, which could then be followed by some sort of Marshall Plan after the war ends. Pompeo mentioned a $500 billion Lend-Lease program for Ukraine. Not gonna lie, it's a brilliant idea because it circumvents all the problems of Ukraine's corruption. Think about it, as of now, Ukraine received approximately $40 billion worth of weapons. Now he's mentioning $500 billion. Even if in the end it's just $100 billion worth of weapons, it's still massive. Additionally, Pompeo also stated that part of the plan could be to lift all restrictions on the type of weapons Ukraine can obtain and use. As part of this Lend-Lease program, Trump could tell the Ukrainians, it's open bar with the US arsenal. Purchase whatever you want as long as it's made in USA.
For your consideration, the Jericho.
Of course, this is the best case scenario for Ukraine, but realistically, in the end, the outcome could lay somewhere in the middle. Interestingly, Mike Waltz, who Trump just picked as National Security Advisor, has explained his vision right before the election in an interview with NPR as to how to end the Ukraine war. Not gonna lie, it's very similar to what Pompeo said in the summer. Mike Waltz suggested to enforce the actual energy sanctions on Russia and taking the handcuffs off the long-range weapons we provided Ukraine as well. Now, is all this going to be enough for Ukraine to win the war? Hard to say. It won't solve the shortage of manpower and the inherent structural problems of the Ukrainian armed forces. Now, before we end, there was one last thing I wanted to mention. On the 8th of November, the Biden administration officially lifted a de facto ban on American military contractors deploying to Ukraine in order to help the country's military to maintain and repair US-provided weapon systems. We can be pretty sure that all this US military personnel was already on the ground in Ukraine for a while. But now it's official. Coincidentally, 1 week before, on the 28th of October, Zelensky signed a law allowing foreigners to be recruited into military service under a contract, not only as soldiers and sergeants, but also as actual officers. My friends, I don't know what could happen, but something is brewing. Maybe this will open the gate of foreign pilots fighting for the AFU. That's all I have for you today. Let me know in the comment section what you thought of my analysis. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you want to support my work, make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal. The links are in the description below.